Morning, Glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt, live inside the nation's Beltway on this Wednesday, May the 4th, in the year of our Lord 2022. J.D. Vance will be the next senator from Ohio, nominated last night by the Republican Party, winning 32% of the vote. Josh Mandel, 24%. Matt Dolan, 23%, proving a number of things. Former President Trump's endorsement matters a lot. Peter Thiel's backing matters a lot. And that there is a not Trump rump within the Republican Party that is probably as equal as to the always Trump rump that helped JD over the top. He was behind until the former president endorsed him. He won handily. He is going to win handily. I note that Matt Dolan quickly came out and endorsed him on Twitter. Very classy act by the state senator. And Matt Dolan delivered the two largest counties. He won Franklin County is where Columbus is, and Cuyahoga County is where Cleveland is. He won those counties handily, and his throwing in with JD brings the party together. I'm sure Josh will follow suit, and JD Vance should beat my friend, but he's a Democrat, Tim Ryan, and Tim is committed to a abortion all the time regime, and said so yesterday on the eve of the primary, and that's not going to fly in Ohio. It's a pro-life state. Sign the heartbeat bill. It's a red state. It's a Trump state. And Tim Ryan's a great candidate, but he ain't going to make that up in 2022. Dan Balls, Dean of Political Reporters, writes this morning in the Washington Post that a decision to overturn Roe v. Wade might upend the midterm. First paragraph, that's the header. In an already divided country, political battle lines hardened Tuesday with the prospect of the Supreme Court poised to overturn Roe v. Wade, a move that threatens to upend the 2022 midterms and turn the campaign into a massive mobilizing effort over the issue of abortion, individual rights, and the contrasting philosophy of the two major parties. Not so fast, Dan. Now, Dan Balls is the dean of correspondence because he's as fair can be, he's as thorough can be. But here he's simply wrong. Byron York had the same reaction yesterday, and I both think they've got a little bit of too much Beltway on the mind. It may consume Beltway people forever. It's an earthquake in the country. I'm still reeling from the betrayal of the individual, whoever did it, and shocked at the damage done to the court. I'll talk about that in a moment. But I'm telling you, inflation and stagflation and decline in markets and growth collapsing is going to drive this election. There's no way to get the president out of the dumps. The collapse of Afghanistan, the unpreparedness in Ukraine, all of this stuff will come together with a massive rebuke in the fall of 2022. And then, since it's going to come after the reversal of Roe and Casey, if in fact that happens, that will fall to become a state issue. And abortion isn't going to be illegal in California or New York or anywhere where it's presently legal. It may be illegal in some states. It may be restricted in others, like Texas. And it may just generally be, as it should be, decided by state legislature and initiatives. It's not going to fundamentally change American politics because all of those who've changed sides or picked up sides on this one and are driven by that, the saliency of that issue is very low in America, except for a few hardcore extremists. I do want to say that some people are busy trying to take the suspects, and those would be the clerks for the three liberal justices, and narrow down their suspects, and they're doing Sherlock Holmes online. Don't do that. The rule of law was threatened yesterday by a fanatic, and those who are going after that fanatic sua sponte are themselves endangering the rule of law and maybe threatening the lives of innocent people and the careers of innocent people and smearing innocent people. And the rule of law predates the Constitution, which the fanatic hurt yesterday badly, as the Chief Justice said, a singular and egregious act of damage against the court. But if you go around accusing people based on your internet research for the benefit of clicks, that's also contrary to the spirit of the rule of law. You, me, everyone listening, everyone reading, everything is protected every day by the rule of law. You don't take the law into your own hands. If you do, you're a criminal. You should go to jail. You should be punished, fined at least, pay civil forfeiture, whatever it is that happens whenever you break the law. But the rule of law, deeply embedded in this country, this free country, is what makes us different, and the presumption of innocence is part of that. So people ought not to be, oh, I think it's this person, and then laying out all the details of his or her life on the internet. Because we got fanatics on the right to life side, too, and those fanatics have killed. And fanatics on the left have killed. Bernie Sanders fanatic trying to gun down half the Congress at a softball practice or baseball practice, if people recall. Not that long ago. And you don't want to arm the fanatics with targets. You just don't. So don't. In a call with Macron, Putin says the West is at fault. No change there. Moscow is under fire for saying that Israel is like Hitler for backing the neo-Nazis in Ukraine. Doesn't matter. Putin's going to Putin. He's a fanatic and he's a nut and he's got nukes. The Ukraine war cast a shadow over Transnistria, which is a section in Moldova, which I think the West ought to get together and take back for the rest of Moldova now before Putin gets there and help Moldova out. China, according to the Wall Street Journal, is fearful of getting cut off like Russia's been cut off, is moving rapidly to try and make themselves self-reliant on everything. But they can't, because they need the rest of the world to trade with in order to flourish and keep their people, their vast population, from falling into poverty. China can't cut itself off. Talk ratings sink as viewers tune out Piers Morgan. Remember, Piers Morgan did an initial interview with former President Trump and got a big rating spike when he launched his latest attempt at a comeback, which, his career collapsed after he went to CNN, tried to replace the one and the only Larry King, and he's come back 4 or 5 times. He's like Satchel Paige, but Satchel Paige was successful in his comeback. The Horn of Africa, I did not know this, and people everywhere ought to pray for these people. The Horn of Africa, Somaliland, Ethiopia, Eritrea, been ravaged by a drought. The Financial Times focused on it today, and I had never seen anything that awful. Henry Olsen had a great opinion piece in the Washington Post yesterday. The leak is a shock. What the draft decision says is not. And I tweeted it out. I hope you follow me on Twitter at Hugh Hewitt. You ought to see this because it's really quite an amazing summary. Nobody is surprised that at least 5, and I suspect 6 justices are going to overturn Roe and Casey. It's bad constitutional law. It's been bad constitutional law for 49 years, and everybody who knows constitutional law knows that. They say, reliance, and it should be that way. Well, amend the Constitution or pass a national law based on interstate commerce. Amazon announced yesterday they're going to give $1,000 to any employee who needs to travel to get an abortion. Got to rethink my ownership of Amazon stock after hearing that. Really do, even though it's down right now. And I can't believe corporations want to get involved in the culture wars, but they do, because they are run by primarily elitists from elitist places, the 4 deep blue bubbles of New York, Washington, D.C., Silicon Valley, and Los Angeles. Those are the deep blue bubbles, and Silicon Valley includes San Francisco. And they reflexively need to be seen left virtue signaling. Meanwhile, Mitch McConnell took the Senate floor yesterday, cut number 4.
The same political movement that used a leak to move up the timeline of Justice Breyer's retirement process is trying to use yet another leak to make the court less secure and less impartial. Never before in modern history has an internal draft been leaked to the public while the justices were still deciding a case. Never before. Whoever committed this lawless act knew exactly what it could bring about. The justices already require security. Less than 2 weeks ago, an unbalanced person lit himself on fire on the court steps. Less than 3 years ago, a liberal mob tried to storm the court, shoving past law enforcement and pounding on the doors. Look, everybody knows what kind of climate the far left is trying to fuel. One that is antithetical to the rule of law. Right on cue, top Democrats began publishing wild statements about what the court might decide, packed with using unhinged rhetoric that could easily light a match.
Stop there. That is so important for people to understand what fanatics do. It's why I don't want people going after the fanatic that they suspect did this, because what if you're wrong? What if you get one of the deranged people on the far right to act against someone you've named online? Then the culpability is yours. Fanatics exist. You have to keep them in mind whenever you talk in a public space. That fanatics are out there on the left and the right, and you are responsible for those actions if you're the proximate cause of them. I'm coming right back with a lot more on this Wednesday edition of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. But going back to Ohio's Senate race yesterday, J.D. Vance, now the Republican nominee. I was joined in moderating a debate of the then 6 candidates, 5 of whom remained last night, by Aaron BAER, president of the Center for Christian Virtue in Columbus, Ohio. Aaron and I moderated a debate that went on for a couple hours in front of 1,500 people, and I knew then it was going to be a great, interesting, fascinating race. Aaron BAER joins me now. Good morning, Aaron.
Hey, good morning, Hugh.
Now, I always go to bed early because, I got to get up early. So tell me, what time was the race over? What time did we know?
Probably by about 9:30, all of the major races were decided. But the real takeaway for me, Hugh, on this was, when you left Ohio that night, you said it was a signal. The next morning, you said the 1,500 people in the church were a signal of the enthusiasm in Ohio, 6 months before the election. That's one of the numbers that showed up in the polls last night when Republican turnout doubled Democrat turnout statewide in Ohio last night. I mean, and you can't say that there wasn't a big Democrat race. Yeah, there wasn't a lot of fireworks in the Senate race, but in the Democrat governor's race, it was a really hotly contested race, and it was a double of the turnout for Republicans last night.
That is I do think, Tim Ryan is my friend. Everyone knows that. I've said it 100 times, the Democratic nominee for Senate. But JD's going to coast, don't you think?
For the most part, what's happened in Ohio has really turned the state red. I will say, though, Tim Ryan is the type of candidate that can win. For the last 2 months, and really because he didn't have a real primary challenger, but for the last 2 months, Tim Ryan has been running general election ads. I'm seeing all over the place, talking about standing up to China, talking about fighting for workers, really the Trump message he's running on right now and trying to convince people that that's who he is. So he's not a walkover. But J.D. Vance is in a really strong position, especially after the campaign he ran.
Tell me a little bit about your assessment of J.D. Vance's campaign. The author of Hillbilly Elegy, Yale educated, backed by Peter Thiel and Donald Trump, J.D. Vance enters this race after a bruising primary, which usually serves, if it's early, to toughen a candidate, not hurt them.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. I'm not somebody who's against primaries, especially when you get a chance. A guy like J.D. Vance, who very few people actually knew here, he got out in the state, he talked to people. But what I think is really important about what J.D. Vance did, and actually what a lot of those candidates on the stage did, is they all ran on core issues that matter to conservative voters. I mean, that was the thing I walked away the most from that night we were on stage together, Hugh, was that most of these candidates, even Matt Dolan, were trying to appeal to core conservative voters, core conservative values. That's the message J.D. ran on from day one, and it carried him through. And again, there were a lot of other fine folks doing that, folks like Josh Mandel, folks like Jane Timken. They were running on that core message. JD was able to reach people, and I think there was an authenticity thing that he really delivered.
I'm talking with Aaron BAER, president of the Center for Christian Virtue in Columbus, lobbying the legislature and state candidates, very close to everyone who's won anything in Ohio. Aaron represents probably the most potent political force in Columbus, and the State House knows that. Aaron, the Columbus could not get their act together to get maps fixed. But the congressional races, just fill me in, are those now settled? Do we know the districts? Are they in ink?
We do. The congressional races are, and Hugh, thank you for bringing that up, because Ohio voters need to know this isn't the end of the primary season. We still have our state legislative maps, which are really important for things like the backpack bill and giving every kid choice. But the congressional maps are settled. You saw folks like Max Miller, who got Trump's endorsement up in Northeast Ohio, Madison Gesiato, another one that got Trump's endorsement up in Northeast Ohio. Really, the really interesting one is the seat going after to challenge Marcy Kaptur up in Toledo. J.R. Majewski looks like he might be carrying this away, and he's really the guy that came out of nowhere. So that there's some really interesting things that happened in the congressional races, but those maps are settled. State maps are not. State legislative maps are not.
Do you happen to know off the top of your head where Warren settled? Who's representing Warren? I got to know who to get on the air.
Actually, you and my dad asked me that question. My dad asked me that question last week. I believe they might be under Joyce, Dave Joyce now. But don't take me to the record on that one. I believe it might be Dave Joyce now.
Now, Aaron, when the Supreme Court rejects the next round of maps, as they inevitably will, because it's just what they do. It's
they can't help themselves, right?
Yeah, they can't. What happens?
Well, this is where the federal court actually issued a decision and said, listen, if you guys can't get your act together by the end of May, we're just going to defer back to, I believe it was the second map that they passed. They've passed 4 now, and the Supreme Court basically just wants to say, hey, we're in charge, not you guys, and that's not going to fly. So the federal courts now stepped in and said, if you guys can't figure this out, we're just going to go with this map and have your election. So it's all going to get settled sooner or later, and then it's looking like August 2nd, sometime in August, we'll have a second primary.
Okay, last and important question. How much did President Trump's endorsement matter? How much did Peter Thiel's money matter to J.D. Vance's victory?
I don't think you can understate either one of those factors in this. One, just in terms of JD getting his message out, but also in terms of helping folks sort through this. And because all these candidates here, you saw it, all these candidates were running on a very similar message, which conservatives need to understand how big of a win that was for the conservative movement, that these candidates now, unlike any time in Ohio, saw the way to win was appealing to core conservative issues, pro-life, pro-family, pro-freedom. Those were the issues basically every candidate tried to run on. Quick
question, Aaron. Is J.D. Vance the same as, to the right or to the left of Rob Portman?
Oh, he is to the right of Rob Portman for sure.
Who do you most compare him to in the Senate?
He would say himself, Josh Hawley, very much in line with Josh Hawley.
All right. Aaron BAER, you will keep us posted on this race throughout the year. He's the president of the Center for Christian Virtue. And you ought to go and Google that, Center for Christian Virtue. They are the force majeure in Columbus, and they have been growing and growing because Aaron is from Warren and he knows what he's doing. Unfortunately, married to a wonderful but misguided Steelers fan. Go nowhere, America. Senator Hales from Iowa. Good morning, Senator. Always a pleasure to speak with you.
It is always great to be with you as well, Hugh. Thanks so much.
You know, yesterday, the fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I were out walking to dinner, and we passed two soldiers, obviously soldiers with their big packs, doing a very long walk. And I said to her, I think Senator Ernst does that annually. Am I right about that?
Oh, I do it every few weeks. Yeah, we're frequent walkers down on the mall. We'll go out marching. I have a rucksack, and I'll get some staff members or friends, and we just go out. It's a great exercise, but, a way to remember who we are, where our roots are, and honor those that have served.
Well, those packs look heavy. I get my miles in, but I don't ever carry. I don't know how to. So, Senator Ernst, you're pro-life. Let's skip the leak. We all know it's awful. We know the Chief Justice investigate. Let's focus on the draft opinion. Yeah. Do you want it to issue? Would you be happy if that opinion issues? I would. I know a lot of people would, but what do you think?
And and I hope that everyone knows that I am adamantly pro-life. However, with the leak, and I said this yesterday, I think is absolutely abhorrent. And so I do believe that the Supreme Court has to go through its proper processes, and those should be independent deliberations. And because of that leak now, there is undue pressure on our justices. And of course, there are a lot of pro-abortion folks out there that will try and get those justices to change their decision. But again, I'm adamantly pro-life, and so I would be okay if it moved forward, but that's not my decision. It should be the independent decision of the Supreme Court.
Now, I've been teaching these cases for 25 years at Chapman University Fowler School of Law, and I know them backwards and forwards, and so I read the opinion. I'm persuaded it's the correct opinion. I hope it's at least a 6-3 decision. I don't know if you've had a chance to read the opinion or what you think of its reasoning, but I find it persuasive. Did you have a chance to read it?
I have not, Hugh. So with all the stuff we're working on here, but I do have some members of my legal team, and we sat down briefly yesterday, and I tried to hit some of those high points and what they have been able to review so far. They also thought it was very sound reasoning and not coming from a pro-life or pro-abortion standpoint. They were looking at it as just pure reasoning, and they felt that it was the right direction. So I'm excited to dig in a little deeper and see. But this is unfortunate, Hugh. I shouldn't even have this opportunity, right?
Yes.
It is because it was leaked. And the crazy thing is there are very few people that have access to these opinions. So what we feel is that as the court goes through their investigative process, they'll be able to determine who leaked the information and then hold them accountable to the laws that apply to this type of situation. But again, I'm just so disgusted that this happened to one of those remaining institutions in our federal government that people actually have trust in.
Now, Senator Ernst, your colleague, Senator Cotton, yesterday raised what I think a lot of us immediately worried about, which is fanatics. And I drove past the
Yeah.
baseball field on which many of your colleagues, including the former senator and now
Mm-hmm.
ambassador Jeff Flake, was shot at by a
Mm-hmm.
fanatic. And Senator Cotton said they've got to throw up a lot of additional security around the justices because of now this sort of lights a match under the crazies. Do you share that concern?
I do share that concern, and we have seen the rhetoric and the level of hatred that has come up, and it's becoming normalized, and it should not. And so that's something that I thought about yesterday, was that I don't care where you are on the scope of your view on this opinion, those justices need to be protected. I know that they will probably receive threats. They will be yelled at. I'm sure their homes might be targeted, whatever the case may be. And that is absolutely unacceptable. It is okay to protest, but when it is going to the level of you are encouraging violence, that is not acceptable at all. I heard there were calls to burn it down coming
Yes,
from
there
the
were.
left.
Yes.
And that is unacceptable. We need to make that clear. It is not okay. It is your ideology. It is not okay. This is the United States. We can protest peacefully. We can have disagreements. But when you're threatening violence upon others, never.
And in
not
that
okay.
term, in that phrase, burn it down, there is the implicit, indeed it's an explicit threat of violence.
Yes,
Senator,
there
while
is.
I have you, I want to go to Ukraine because you visited, you know the situation in Eastern Europe. You're under no delusions about Putin's state of mind or his ability to be persuaded. He called up Macron yesterday and said it's the West's fault. The Pope seemed to agree with him. What is your
No.
assessment of this?
Absolutely not. Are you kidding? Ukraine is a sovereign country, and they look to the West. They want to be free and independent and have the same opportunities that other westward-leaning countries have had for their citizens. Russia invaded Ukraine. Bottom line. And we should not be saying, oh, it's the West's fault, it's the United States' fault. No, absolutely not. This is a country ruled by an autocratic, murderous thug that has dared to breach the borders of another sovereign country. This is no one's fault but Vladimir Putin's fault. So I think we need to make sure that everyone is very clear on that, and we should be stepping up as required through the Budapest Agreement and helping Ukraine defend itself, its soldiers, its military. The citizens of Ukraine are stepping up to fight back against Russia and the invaders. So I think we can enable that. We should continue that. Other nations are stepping forward. They are supporting Ukraine as well. It is Vladimir Putin's fault.
So, Senator Ernst, the famous phrase in Democratic circles for your colleagues across the aisles is never let a crisis go to waste. And so the attempt is underway to marry unnecessary COVID spending that would have additional inflationary impact to aid for Ukraine. Will you vote or oppose such a package that links those two things?
Yes, and we are adamant that we should not be pairing that with support for Ukraine. We need to have clear and independent votes. And so I want to make sure that we are just voting on the humanitarian aid and the lethal aid for Ukraine. I think that is very, very clear. I don't believe it will move forward if they pair. And, just in discussions amongst my colleagues, and Senator Mitch McConnell has made it very clear that the way it moves forward is not by pairing it with a bunch of random spending that is out there. The Biden administration wants to lift Title 42 at the border. So it seems COVID's over, so maybe we don't need to worry about a COVID package.
Very well put. So, Senator, what's the decision tree on? We got to get that aid to Ukraine, especially in forms of armaments that they're running low on in the Donbass region and other regions that Russia is threatening. Where is Senator Schumer? I mean, where are the Democrats with a Ukraine straight-up aid package? If the speaker can go there with an all-Democratic delegation, you would think they would be ready to move.
Well, you would think they would be ready to move, and that's it. We got all show, no go. So I am thankful that Nancy Pelosi went. It was interesting. It was not a bipartisan delegation. I did lead a bipartisan delegation of 10 senators to Poland and to Germany. I think it's very important that we're working together in a bipartisan nature against the threat of Russia and Ukraine. But they're great about getting those photoshops, the shots out there on the ground in Ukraine, talking to Volodymyr Zelensky. But come on, let's push this aid through independently, not tied with a bunch of unnecessary spending that Democrats just want.
We've got less than a minute, Senator.
Yep, let's do it.
Dan Balls has said in the Post this morning that the leaked opinion and any subsequent decision could upend the 2022 elections. Do you think it would actually have much of an impact in Iowa, where Senator Grassley is seeking re-election and Ashley Hinton and others are running?
I don't see that as being a decision point for Iowa voters. They are concerned about 40-year high inflation, prices at the pump, bad economy. That's what they're worried about. So I think it might have a little blip here, but not overall. I think Republicans are going to seize the Senate.
Senator Joni Ernst, keep coming back, and I'll look for you out on the mall with your russock doing your march. I mean, I really find it amazing when I see the soldiers who are doing that to stay in shape. Thank you, Senator. I'll be right back on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt, joined now by Ambassador Nikki Haley, also formerly the governor of South Carolina. Welcome back, Ambassador. Always a pleasure to speak with you.
Good morning, Hugh. It's great to be with you.
I want to get to the Russians, to Vladimir Putin and Ambassador Lavrov and Foreign Minister Lavrov. But first, you're a pro-life woman. You're well known as that. If the Dobbs decision turns out the way the Alito draft opinion would have it turn out, will you be happy?
Of course. I think it's a real opportunity, but I think we need to take it further than just, the division they've always tried to do with America, with pro-life, pro-abortion. I think what we need to look at, the fact is, how do we really support women? This is an opportunity to make sure that we give emotional support to women, that we give educational support to women, that we make sure that we have, contraception education available, all of these things. It should be more than that. And I think that, for example, in South Carolina, the majority of women who've been getting abortions are between the ages of 25 and 29. Well, when I was governor, we did something where, you had the opportunity to see the ultrasound before you made a decision. You had someone come in that talked to you about what your options were. I mean, I think we really need to go to support women in this process, but it's certainly, a great opportunity for the pro-life movement. More than that, it's a great opportunity for women and babies and saving as many as we can across this country.
I agree that, Madam Ambassador. I did, however, speak to a pro-choice Republican yesterday who said they worried about the 15-year-old girl who finds herself pregnant and a family that she's afraid of. So what do we do for them?
We go and we give them the emotional support that they need. I'm not pro-life because the Republican Party tells me to be pro-life. I'm pro-life because my husband was adopted, and I have the blessing of, being with him every day. I had trouble having both of my children. There are so many parents across this country that would love to have children and love to support those girls and women who are put in that position. And I think that this is a time for America to double down on what do we need to do to support girls and women when they get put into this situation, and how do we create the best life for babies we possibly can. There's an opportunity here, Hugh. This shouldn't be done as a fear situation. This should be done as a support situation on how we can truly lift up women in a way that we've never done before, and how we can really create better lives for babies than has ever been possible before.
Well said, Madam Ambassador. One political question. J.D. Vance won the nomination last night fairly handily after receiving the endorsement of President Trump. How do you quantify, if it can be quantified, former President Trump's influence in the Republican Party?
Well, I think he's going to be an important voice in the Republican Party for a long time. And I think that, you're going to look at race by race, and they're going to want to try and analyze what the importance of President Trump's influence is. And I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's the Trump influence, but I also think it's the quality of the candidate. And, as we go into Pennsylvania, as we go into Georgia, as we go into Arizona, we're really going to have to focus not so much on endorsements and how that plays out is which Republicans are talking about solutions. That's where we need to be. I've often said that, look, half the battle is winning the House, the Senate, the 36 governors' races. But the other more important half of the battle is proving that we deserve to be there when we win by showing that we have the solutions that lift up everybody, not just a small group of people.
Now, Ambassador Haley, let's turn, to your sweet spot, your strike zone. That is Foreign Minister Lavrov, President Putin. The Russians have really surprised everyone with the depth of their malignity. And Foreign Minister Lavrov's comments about Israel and Hitler, it's just insane. Is this the Lavrov you dealt with?
Absolutely. Did not surprise me one bit. He is a twisted individual who has a terrible drinking problem, who will do nothing and say nothing that's too outrageous. He's just a ridiculous individual. And what he's going to do is say whatever he can to get attention, to put fear in the hearts of every person in this world. And that's what he's trying to do. And they don't care whether they're lying. They just believe in distraction. And I think that Russia knows they're losing this war. I think they're going to try and distract in every way possible. I think that there's hatred at the start of all of this, and I think that they are not just going to limit this to parts of Ukraine. They're not giving up until they get all of Ukraine, and we should also believe them when they say they want Poland and the Baltics as well.
I do not believe that your time overlapped with National Security Advisor O'Brien when you were the ambassador and in the cabinet. He was a National Security Advisor, but he wrote a piece for the Wall Street Journal suggesting that President Biden and his team articulate exactly what would happen if a tactical nuclear weapon was used in Ukraine. Do you agree that we ought to be very specific about the consequences of such an unheard of escalation?
Well, I do know Ambassador O'Brien and actually worked with him in a different capacity when he was at the State Department. What I'll tell you is that, we shouldn't assume that Russia will never use nuclear weapons. But we should focus every day on how we prevent them from using nuclear weapons. And the way you prevent them from using nuclear weapons is with strength, not cowering to them, not running from them, not worrying about provoking them, but with strength. And you don't do it with just American strength. You do it with strength of America and her allies. This is a time to really solidify the world on the dangers of Russia, whether it's pointing out their rhetoric, whether it's pointing out the fact that they're killing innocent civilians, whether it's pointing out the fact that they haven't kept their word on any of this, whether it's pointing out war crimes. When we do that, that's when we pull in the Indias of the world. That's when we bring in Japan. That's when we bring in our European allies. And that's when we speak with one voice and tell Russia that if you do this, there will be hell to pay. And that's the decision we have to make as a unit of allies that want to save freedom in this world.
Ambassador Haley, do you connect the dots between President Obama's failure to enforce the red line, the genocide in Syria that followed, the 2014 Russian invasion, and the 2022 Russian invasion? Are those all of a piece?
I think it's all part of a similar plan that you look at countries, and I saw this at the United Nations. They watch every word we say. They watch every action we take. They literally pay attention to every detail of everything we do, which we should also be doing of them, by the way. But when they do that, they look for weak spots. And when they find a weak spot, they try and exploit it. That was actually a major dangerous decision that Obama did. President Trump fixed that by making sure that when Russia and Assad used chemical weapons in Syria, he went and sent missiles into that area that hit their chemical areas. And so I think that sent a big message that, look, we know what Obama did, but we believe in red lines and we're going to enforce them. That all went backwards in a major way when Biden, left Afghanistan in the middle of the night without telling our allies who we asked to be there, who stood shoulder to shoulder with us for decades. It was a hugely weak moment for America, and it was a green light for every enemy that we have.
I'm talking with Ambassador Nikki Haley, longtime governor of South Carolina, ambassador to the United Nations under President Trump, member of the cabinet. Ambassador Haley, are you working with a PAC to support candidates who are actively involved in peace through strength policies in the United States?
Yes, and thank you for asking. So we started Stand for America PAC, and what we're doing, Hugh, is we are recruiting candidates, endorsing candidates in House, Senate, and gubernatorial races with the goal of we don't just want candidates that are politically good. We want candidates that are policy good, that are going to really make a difference when they get there. And to date, we have endorsed 35 candidates, but what we do that's different is we don't just give a check to a candidate and say, go win. So, for example, when we endorsed Glenn Youngkin, I went on the ground, campaigned for him, fundraised. We raised $500,000 on the ground for him. But then we went to our base of over 3 million grassroots supporters. And when he was in that final stretch, we raised him $400,000 in 2 days in small dollars, $5, $10, and $20 that went directly into his campaign account. We're doing what the Democrats have done for years. We're making sure that we use our grassroots that says, look, Tiffany Smiley's running in Washington State. We think we can actually move her over the finish line. Go to StandForAmericaPAC.com, give $5, $10, $20 today, and let's show that we can win in Washington State, too. So whether it's Herschel Walker, whether it's Tiffany Smiley in Washington, whether it's Ron Johnson, we are really going out there to make sure that we get good, strong conservatives into Congress, into our governor's offices, to really get our country back on track.
I'm sure you'll be stumping for JD in Ohio as well. StandForAmericaPAC.com. Let me close this way, Ambassador. This week I had lunch with a member of the Reagan Foundation, complimenting them on the Reagan Defense Forum. Last night, the Nixon seminar met with former Secretary Pompeo, former National Security O'Brien, and former Secretaries of Energy Perry and Brulé to talk about energy security as national security. So peace through strength has ways of making itself felt. I think it's having a renaissance. Do you agree with me on that?
I agree, and we should make it so. I mean, I think that there was strength mattered in the Trump administration when we were energy independent, when our foreign foes knew exactly what we were about, when we understood the value of a dollar, and if a weak dollar was actually a threat to our national security. We've got to get that peace through strength back. This is not about going to war. This is about preventing war and making sure that the world is more safe.
Ambassador Nikki Haley, always a pleasure to speak with you. Give me the PAC again. I want to make sure it's correct.
It is StandForAmericaPAC.com. I hope everybody will go and look it up, look at the candidates we're talking about, and look at the policies that we're pushing. This is going to be a great day in America again, but it's going to take every voice and every person being a part of that solution.
Ambassador, one more minute. I'm older than you by a lot. And so in 1978, things were really bleak, and I went to work for Richard Nixon, and Iran was in chaos, and Cubans were all over Africa, and the Soviet Union was advancing on many fronts and invaded Afghanistan. This feels a lot like 1978, but then 1980 arrived. Am I being overly optimistic that we always hit a point this low before we bounce back?
I completely agree with you. Sometimes we have to hit rock bottom to know where up is. Now all we have to do is look up and say, okay, now it's time for each and every one of us to get to work. You know, what you can find is the world is more dangerous when we are distracted. We have been completely distracted for way too long, whether it's on culture wars, whether it's on CRT, whether it's on the fact that, believe it or not, my husband's a combat veteran. The fact that military members have to go and take pro-gender pronoun classes is beyond me. We have to go and stop all of the distractions and start focusing on freedom again and focusing on a strong America. That's when we'll win. We've done it before. I have faith we're going to be okay. We just have to get back on the right track.
StandForAmericaPAC.com. Ambassador Haley, thanks. Keep coming back. Always love speaking with you.
We'll do it. Thanks so much, Hugh.
Thank you, Ambassador. Welcome back, America. Dr. Michael Youssef is the founder of the Church of the Apostles in Atlanta. He joins me now because he has a brand new book out, Never Give Up. Good morning, Dr. Youssef. How are you?
Good morning, my dear friend. How are you? Good to see you.
Good to see you. I got to tell you, a book has impacted you when you start telling anecdotes about it, even when you don't have it. So I read the book about 3 weeks ago. I went to France for 2 weeks on a listener cruise, and I told the O. Henry story because it's one of the greatest dying stories I've ever read. And that chapter alone is worth Never Give Up. I had never heard that story before. I'm not going to tell it now, but why did you include it?
Okay. I'm sorry. Which story is that again?
Yeah, when Henry is dying and they say, his feet are cold, so he must be dead.
Forgive me. Yeah. Well, I've always been fascinated by the last words people say when they die. And it began back in 1964 when my mother died. And we were all 8 of us around the bed when Yusha's not well, but she starts saying, I can hear them singing, I can hear them singing. And so that really left an indelible mark on me, and I began to really research people, how they, he was a character, because he literally opened one eye and said, Joan of Arc did. And
it makes me laugh. So, when you get an anecdote like that, and it hits you, and you can't remember where you got it, the book has made a dent. So let's talk about Never Give Up in bookstores now. Why draw on Winston Churchill's mighty exhortation, never give up, never, 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 never give up?
Yep. That actually, he's one of my heroes, and I've read everything I can get my hands on from Winston Churchill. And as you know, we have a big ministry in England. We're celebrating 20 years this year in the UK, and we got a big celebration at Windsor Castle. So I've always been fascinated by Winston Churchill against all odds. And when people want to give up, he said, never, 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 never give up. That was his shorter speech he gave to his alma mater. But, the words aside, and what I've learned from others aside, in fact, everything I know I've learned from others. But you read the news as I do, Hugh, and you see this grieving thing that's happening in the church today. And so many mega church pastors are going through what they call deconstruction, and they're turning their back on the faith. And it's almost every day there's news of people giving up the faith that they preached for many years. And so I want to reach the next generation. I want to go to young pastors and young elders and deacons and church leaders, and as well as people in the pews, and say, look, we are facing difficult times. Yes, we are facing persecution. We really are. We are facing mental persecution. They call us every name in the book. But instead of us backing down of the truth of the Scripture, of the absolute truth of the Judeo-Christian Word of God, that we need to wear these accusations as a badge of honor. Jesus said, "Blessed are you when they say these things about you." And so, far from being worried or call it bigots or phobes or this or that, we need to stand up, hold the truth. And so I couldn't find a better message from the Word of God. The whole Word of God I honor and revere. But the second epistle of Paul to Timothy, the last words that he spoke, my wife and I stood in that miserable dungeon in Rome, and we couldn't stand there for very long. It was just thinking about Paul was in this dungeon, hole in the wall, and that's in the ceiling, not in the wall. And they dropped him in there, dropped food, and then pulled him out, and then executed him. But before he died, he was writing to Timothy. He says, look, if you live in fear, you are in a worse prison than where I am. And therefore, he exhorts him not to fear, not to be intimidated, not to give up, but to uphold the truth of the gospel. Guard the gospel unmolested and uncompromised. The truth is the truth is the truth. And we must say the truth with our words, but also have love in our hearts. I think,
I've been blessed, Pastor, by pastors who have never not encouraged me to do exactly that. But a lot of young pastors and a lot of old Christians who become politicized, they have given that up. So are you an optimist about getting the church back to kind of a true north?
Well, the thing is that my confidence comes from the fact that Jesus said that the gates of hell shall not overcome it, that the Church of Jesus Christ will be victorious, even though some may struggle along the way. So my hope is that I will have the soldiers of the cross marching on instead of crawling, and instead of being dragged on. But I wanted them to march on to victory, because we know that our victory has already been won on the cross.
Never Give Up is Dr. Michael Youssef's new book. It will leave as much of an impact on you as it did on me. I want to thank you for that, Doctor, because there are other stories, like D.L. Moody's going, and your mother, and when you were only 16. So congratulations on Never Give Up. I hope I see you in Atlanta soon, Doctor, when you come to the Beltway.
I would love to see you.
Thank you, Doctor. Don't anyone go anywhere. Stay on this radio station, but I'll be back tomorrow, America. Don't forget, you can go hear the podcast, Highly Concentrated Hugh. Please subscribe. Please endorse it. Please tell your friends about it. If you want to hear Nikki Haley and Joni Ernst and Michael Youssef and everything else I've done, the rundown, it's all at Highly Concentrated Hugh at iTunes and everywhere where podcasts are available. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Thank you, Jacob. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Adam. And thank you, Dwayne. I'm Hugh Hewitt.